What's your reaction to it?
Well, it is the end of an era of aircraft manufacturing in Manchester. Chadderton played a very important part in the industry, in British aircraft industry, and as did Woodford. And this area now, it's pretty sad that manufacturing has ended.
It has been a long history, not just for Avro, but for Greater Manchester in terms of aviation and aircraft, hasn't it?
Oh yes, because Avro started in Manchester, of course, in 1910. He'd actually flown before, but he established his manufacturing company in Ancoats in 1910. So it is over 100 years of aviation in Manchester. So, and of course it's a very long, proud history with a lot of fine aeroplanes. I mean, you just got to look at the list of Avro aeroplanes around the world, which are still going, of course, are well known throughout the world. From the early Avro 504 from the First World War, through famous aeroplanes like the Tutor, the Anson, up to the wartime, which is of course the Lancaster, which is probably the most famous bomber to come out of the Second World War, and involved with all the major raids that were taking part. And then we went on to an aeroplane called the Shackleton, which was the backbone of the Coastal Command for over 40 years, and the Vulcan, of course. So, I mean, you can't get much more famous than any of those, can you?
Indeed you can't. In fact, let's talk about a couple of those specifically and their role in history, Harry. I mean, you mentioned the Lancaster. As you say, probably, it and the Spitfire are the two most famous aircraft probably from the Second World War era, aren't they? Just describe to us what Chadderton's role was in the building of the Lancaster and therefore, you know, the Second World War effort. Well,
Chadderton, of course, was the headquarters of Avro, and if you see the factory now at the front, there is a blue plaque on the front of the building near the office where Roy Chadwick, the chief designer, actually designed the Lancaster, and of course the Lancasters were manufactured at Chadderton. What the arrangement was that all the major components were done at Chadderton. Then they went down by road to Woodford, and they were assembled and test flown from Woodford. And the same thing went on right up until the 748, with you've got the Vulcan, and of course Vulcans, to transport that aeroplane to Woodford was quite a feat, because the centre section itself, the smallest section, was 36 feet wide. So they had to, en route down to Woodford, they had to make lampposts that would fold down in certain areas to let the aeroplane go past.
It must have been quite a sight. I mean, to see those aircraft fly was, you know, something to behold. But to see it sort of, you know, in between factories, as it were, being pulled down the street with the lamppost getting out of the way, must have been something to see.
Yes, fabulous sight. And of course, at any air show now, the Battle of Britain flight still flies a Lancaster, and there is the Vulcan to the sky. People fly the Vulcan, and they, of course, are the main attractions at any air show, along with the Spitfire, of course. But any air show, they are the main attraction. And the model makers, of course, say that the Spitfire and the Lancaster are always the best sellers. Everybody makes those. So, you know.
I mean, the thing about Avro for me was that it didn't just make planes that, as we say, you know, made a massive contribution in the Second World War. In terms of the Vulcan, you know, a massive contribution as far as deterrence in the Cold War was concerned.
Oh, yes.
You know, its contribution shouldn't be underestimated, should it?
No.
But the beauty of the designs was just something to behold, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a fabulous design, and of course, as you can realise, that after the war, it was a kind of unusual aeroplane. Nobody had ever flown a big delta wing aeroplane before. And in fact, when it had its first flight, the first Vulcan prototype had its first flight out of Woodford, and it was painted at that time very white, so silver and white, and all the police were getting reports from all over the place that it was a UFO, a flying saucer, and the whole bit. So it was quite a fantastic aeroplane.
Well, this is the other thing, isn't it? I mean, not just beautiful, not just gorgeous to look at and see flying, with all that grace. The aircraft that Avro turned out were more often than not actually groundbreaking and cutting edge, weren't they?
Oh yes, they were groundbreaking. And the thing is, the pilots themselves always said Avros were nice flying aeroplanes. They were good to handle. And they loved them. And of course, going back to the Anson, there were nearly 11,000 Ansons made, and anybody who was in the RAF during the war would know what an Anson was, because they were used in every role. Beside coastal command, as they started off, they went into ambulance, radio trainers, pilot trainers, and the whole lot. So everybody knew the Anson.
They used in civilian flight as well.
Oh yes, used for many years after the war.
Yeah. So taking all that into account, Harry, the length of time that Avro and what it became in terms of Hawker Siddeley and then subsequently BAE, its contribution to aviation and so on and so forth. I mean, how much of a loss will Chadderton's closure be, do you think?
Well, I think it will be a big loss, mainly because people over the years who've worked there, and there are thousands, of course, and it was a big family, so it's kind of just come to the end of its days now. Things have changed throughout the world, manufacturing's changed, and aircraft production has, all through Britain, has kind of shrunk. So it's a sign of the times, I'm afraid.
And the end of any kind of aircraft manufacture or service or anything like that in Greater Manchester, well, it would seem for good.
Oh yes, yes. I think if you want to see aeroplanes flying now, you've got to go down to Manchester Airport, or Barton or something like that, because they won't be the manufactured aeroplanes won't be flying from around here anymore.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Harry. That's brilliant. Thank you.